All right, we're here on St. Louis Avenue, Sheffield, Alabama. Going to talk about one of the darker events in Sheffield history. Going back to the mid to late 50s, there was a group of kids that ran around St. Louis Avenue. Some lived on the street, some were close residents, just a group of misfits, always into some trouble and whatnot. This story was passed down to me. One of those kids' names was Roger Dale Stafford, and as a young elementary, maybe middle school kid, he's walking down the street on a very cold day. He's bundled up, and a very well-known police officer of the time from Sheffield, last name of Moss, picks him up for truancy. It was a school day, and I don't know if he takes him to the station, but the story goes he gets him somewhere, and Roger, out of his coat, pulls a firearm out, and with the coldest eyes, tells Officer Moss that, "My plan was to kill you, but you were too nice to me." So that sets the tone. Roger Dale Stafford, a young resident of Sheffield, Alabama, here on St. Louis Avenue. We're going to fast forward to the 70s. Roger has married a woman named Verna, and Verna, and his brother Harold are now traveling pretty much as gypsies. 1978 finds them in Oklahoma. They set up an ambush on I-35. Verna has presented herself as a stranded motorist. Harold and Roger Dale are waiting in the bushes. A young family pulls over to render assistance. They ambush the family, murder all three of them, one of which was a 12-year-old boy, steal the car, and 3 weeks later make their way to Oklahoma City and commit one of the most atrocious murders in that city's history, known as the Sirloin Stockade murders, where 6 employees were executed in the cooler and the restaurant robbed. So in the course of less than a month, Roger Dale Stafford and his gang, they have murdered 9 people in Oklahoma. 6 days after the Sirloin Stockade murders, his brother Harold dies in a motorcycle wreck, which is mostly attributed to a suicide. He apparently couldn't handle what he had done. Roger, for whatever reason, phones in an anonymous tip implicating Verna and Harold in the murders. And curtain falls, time passes, the authorities figure out what the whole deal is, and Verna and Roger Dale are arrested and charged with 9 murders in the state of Oklahoma. Okay, so we've got Roger and Verna charged with 9 counts of capital murder in the state of Oklahoma. Verna turns on Roger, divorces him before the trial, agrees to testify against him in exchange for a life sentence. Roger is convicted and sentenced for execution, which is finally carried out in 1995. And Roger's case gets buried somewhat under history. Unfortunately, Oklahoma has 2 cases where there was a larger loss of life, and the name escapes me of the perpetrator, but the term going postal, that came from an event that happened in Oklahoma, 16 co-workers murdered by a disgruntled postal employee, and then of course the Oklahoma City bombing. So you've got 2 cases with a larger loss of life than the Stafford case. So I feel like that case, the Roger Stafford case, gets a little buried in history because of that. Okay, so we're talking about Sheffield history, but we've spent a lot of time talking about events of Oklahoma, so let's reel it in. Verna, in her testifying against her former husband Roger, implicates him in a total of 34 murders, including the 9 in Oklahoma. One of those murders that she implicated him in has a local connection. Muscle Shoals, a very famous murder where Jimmy Berry was murdered. He was an assistant manager and a UNA student working at McDonald's. The buildings have changed, but they're still in their current location on Woodward Avenue, very similar to the Sirloin Stockade murders, killed execution style with a robbery. So that is the unfortunate story of Roger Dale Stafford, implicated in 34 murders, officially convicted of 9 and sentenced to death and executed. And it all started right here, born in Sheffield, Alabama, right here on St. Louis Avenue. And so many people, residents of Sheffield in this area, have no idea that they share a city with a known serial killer. Okay folks, I hope you've enjoyed this little dive into Sheffield history today. I hope to do a lot more. It's been my pleasure to do it. And I also want to leave you with a quote that I'm very proud of, and I want to think I came up with it, that it wasn't borrowed from anywhere else, but it goes something like this: history is neither good nor evil. It is neither to be defended or cheered. History simply is. Thank you.